Hey you guys, we are on our second week of daily grammar practice or DGP. So just like last week, our first day of DGP is we are going to go through and identify the parts of speech and write the correct abbreviation above each word. So our sentence this week is, the dust particles are actually tiny scales. So just like I suggested in our first week, we should start with our nouns and verbs because every single sentence has to have at least one noun and at least one verb in order to be a complete sentence. So if we start with our nouns, we have two nouns on here. We have particles as a noun, and so is scales, all right? And so when you're deciding what kind of nouns they are, they're people, places, things, or ideas, just as a reminder for what nouns are. But for what type of noun, they can either be a common noun, proper noun, or possessive noun, meaning they show ownership, which is what we were working on in addition to DGP last week. But for particles, this is just a common noun, so we're going to use a lowercase n. It's not naming a specific name of a particle. Not very good at science. Don't know if there are actual specific particle names. And scales, it's just referencing just scales in general, not the scales of Mississippi. I don't know. That's not a thing. I'm just making stuff up. Again, science and I, we don't vibe. All right. So we have two nouns on here, and I'm betting that you're like, what, Mrs. Forsman? What about dust here? Dust is a thing. Well, in this case, dust is not a noun. Dust is describing particles. And if we look at our big scary packet, we see that adjectives modify nouns, or another way to say that is they describe nouns. So in this case, dust is describing particles, which is a noun. So if dust is describing a noun, it has to be an adjective, which we'll denote with ADJ. All right, so we've got our two nouns. We need to find a verb, okay? Now last week we had an action verb. The action verb covers. This week our verb is the word are. Now are is not an action verb. I can't see anybody are-ing. I can't are myself. So if you look at your big scary packet to the different types of verbs, we have action verbs, which we know this one is not because I can't see anybody are, but it could be a linking verb or a helping verb. So let's take a look at linking verb. So linking verbs, they link two words together, and then here is a long list of some examples of linking verbs. And if you see, are is one of those words. So this could potentially be a linking verb. Now if we look down at helping verbs, help's an action verb or a linking verb, okay? And then there is another list of helping verbs right here. And if you notice, are is also in that list. So we haven't necessarily narrowed it down just yet, so it could still be linking or it could be helping. Now, it is a linking verb, and here's what I really want you to take away with linking verbs, is that you can replace the linking verb with an equal sign, kind of like in this example. English is fun, English equals fun. And if you can replace it with an equal sign and the sentence still conveys the same message or information, it is a linking verb. So let's look at our sentence. The dust particles are actually tiny scales. So let's say I change are to just an equal sign. The dust particles equal actually tiny scales. Does that still convey the same message that dust particles are tiny scales? Yes. So in this case, it is a linking verb, and we will denote that with an LV. Okay, so now we've got a few extra words. Last week, I know at least in class, we had talked about the word a in last week's sentence and how it is an article. And I asked the students to just go ahead and commit to memory right now that there are three articles, a, an, and the. The word the will come up very, very often, just generally in the English language when we're writing and speaking. It will also come up a ton in DGP. So commit to memory right now that the word the is an article which we denote with the letters ART. All right, now we have actually and tiny. Let's use what we discussed about dust describing particles over here for tiny describing scales. What kind of scales? Well, they're tiny scales. So tiny is modifying or describing the noun scales. What types of words describe nouns? Well, if we look back at dust particles, what kind of words describe nouns? Well, adjectives describe nouns. So ADJ again for tiny, because tiny is describing scales, which is a noun. Now finally we have the word actually. Actually is a fabulous word and one of my favorite parts of speech. You're probably most familiar with adverbs that end in ly. This is one of those instances where an adverb ends in ly. So actually is an adverb, we're going to write ADV. However, not all adverbs end in ly. Let's take a look at our big scary packet. So the big thing to note is adverbs are words that describe or modify other adjectives, verbs, or other adverbs. They can tell how, when, where, and to what extent. So in this case, if we look at our sentence, the adverb actually is describing the adjective tiny. So being able to figure out what these words, what their part of speech is, can help put the puzzle pieces together for words we might not be as familiar with. So if we didn't remember that adverbs can end in ly, that is okay. If we can discern that actually is describing tiny, which is an adjective, and words that describe adjectives are adverbs. Okay, once you are done with that, you can share, like always, up here in the corner. Just type in my email address. Otherwise, if you just want to write it out on a piece of paper, totally fine with me as well. All right, you guys have a great day, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye.